I used to love Christmas. The scent of cinnamon and clove in the air, the old records crackling from Grandma's dusty stereo, the gentle flicker of candlelight reflecting off garlands and wine glasses. It was all part of a ritual I thought would never change. But last Christmas, everything I believed about love, family, and loyalty shattered in one breathless moment. It began like any other holiday gathering. Snow fell softly outside as the family trickled into Grandma's sprawling Victorian home, one of those heirloom houses where secrets felt baked into the walls. I'd spent hours decorating, obsessing over every ribbon and ornament to make the place feel magical. Looking back, it's almost comical. I was dressing up a crime scene and didn't even know it. My husband Ryan was quieter than usual, not distant, exactly, more like rehearsed. He poured wine with robotic cheer, kissed me on the cheek just a little too precisely. I chalked it up to holiday stress, or maybe an argument I'd forgotten we had. It wasn't until the third night of our stay, December 22nd, that the performance cracked. It was late. Most of the family had gone to bed, except for a few of us sitting around the fire. My younger sister, Lila, was lounging nearby, glass of Pinot in hand, her laugh a little too loud, her dress a little too snug. She kept brushing her hair behind her ear, flashing a delicate diamond stud that looked disturbingly familiar. I should have felt something then. A flicker of recognition. A cold ripple of intuition. But instead, I smiled and poured more wine. Later that night, as I was cleaning up alone in the kitchen, Ryan walked in. His face was pale, drawn tight with nerves. I barely had time to ask what was wrong before he blurted it out. "I'm leaving you," he said, voice low but trembling. "For Lila." I thought I misheard him, or that it was a cruel joke, some warped attempt at drama before Christmas. But he didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He didn't even flinch. The room tilted. I braced my hands on the counter to stay upright. "She didn't want me to tell you yet," he added, his voice shaking more now. "We were going to wait until after the holidays, but I couldn't lie anymore." Lie. That word ricocheted in my skull. How long had they been lying? "How long?" I asked, almost too calmly. He hesitated. Then, 2 years. 2 years. That meant birthdays, anniversaries, family barbecues. It meant all those nights he came home late from work, all those times Lila suddenly canceled plans or vanished mid-party with a vague excuse. My baby sister. The one I used to braid hair for. The one I defended through every breakup and meltdown. The one I once held in my arms as she sobbed over a college rejection. The betrayal was dizzying. But the worst part? They had planned this. My husband and my sister had decided together that I didn't need to know until they were good and ready. They had choreographed my heartbreak to fall cleanly after New Year's, like some well-timed press release. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. Instead, I heard footsteps. From the hallway, Grandma stood watching us, silent as a shadow. She didn't say a word, didn't ask a single question. She just looked at Ryan, then at me, then back at Ryan. Her expression was unreadable, but something flashed behind her eyes. A flicker of calculation. She turned away and disappeared down the hall. I didn't know it then, but something had shifted in that moment. Ryan reached out for me, of all things. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. "We didn't plan to fall in love, but they did plan the betrayal." I said nothing. I walked past him and went upstairs to bed, where I laid in the dark for hours, listening to the wind beat against the window panes. The house groaned like it too, had secrets to carry. The next morning, everything looked the same. The snow, the garlands, the coffee pot gurgling in the kitchen. But I was different, and so was Grandma. She was unusually chipper, almost cheerful. She handed me a mug of coffee with an extra sugar cube, the way she used to when I was little. She called me darling, a word she hadn't used in years. Lila entered the kitchen a few minutes later, still wearing her silk robe, looking far too pleased with herself, for someone who just detonated her sister's marriage. She paused when she saw Grandma. Grandma looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Lila, dear," she said, "why don't you make yourself useful and shovel the walkway?" Lila blinked. "The walkway, it's freezing." Grandma raised a brow, never looking away from the newspaper. "So are hearts sometimes." Lila went pale. She left the room without a word. I looked at Grandma. She didn't meet my gaze, but I saw the tiniest hint of a smile tug at the corner of her mouth. I didn't know what she was planning. I just knew something had begun. Lila always knew how to get away with everything. From the time she was a child, she could charm her way out of any consequence. Break a vase? It was a playful accident. Cheat on a test? She was under pressure. Steal my clothes? I thought you wouldn't mind. And it always worked. On teachers, friends, even our parents. Especially our parents. She was the baby. The blonde, blue-eyed miracle born 6 weeks early during a thunderstorm, or so the family legend went. By the time I was 16 and dealing with curfews and calculus, she was 7 and being told she was special. I never minded, until I realized that special came at the cost of being seen myself. Now, standing in Grandma's kitchen just days after my husband's devastating confession, I watched Lila swan into the room like she hadn't just detonated my life. Her silk pajama set looked more appropriate for a boudoir than a family gathering, and her hair was freshly curled, as if betrayal demanded styling. "Oh," she said casually, "I didn't expect you to be up this early. It was 10 a.m. I said nothing. I wasn't ready to hear whatever lie she'd rehearsed. Not from the girl who once cried in my arms after her first heartbreak, and now slept with my husband behind my back. She poured herself a mimosa and sighed dramatically. "I didn't mean for things to happen like this." I stared at her. "I mean, Ryan and I, it just kind of happened. We didn't plan to fall in love," she used the exact phrase he had. I wondered if they practiced it together in bed. "Did you mean for it to happen 2 years ago?" I asked coldly. Her glass paused midair. "You know?" "He told me." "How long? Where? When? The guest room at the lake house? Nice touch." Her eyes flickered, but she smiled. "Look, I never wanted to hurt you. She leaned against the counter, trying to appear soft, vulnerable. "I've always felt like I was living in your shadow. You got the grades, the job, the perfect marriage. I was just trying to find happiness too." I nearly laughed. My shadow? She was the sun in every family photo. I was the backup singer in my own life. "You didn't take my happiness," I said quietly. "You poisoned it." Before she could respond, Grandma entered, holding a bundle of mail. She gave me a once-over, then turned to Lila. "You're wearing that in the kitchen?" she asked coolly. "Is there a dress code for adultery now?" Lila's cheeks flushed. "Excuse me. I'd rather not," Grandma replied. "But if you insist on flaunting what you stole, do it somewhere else. The trash belongs outside." Lila blinked, stunned. I nearly dropped my coffee. It was the first time I had ever heard Grandma speak to her that way. Later that day, the cracks began to show. I overheard a hushed argument between Lila and Ryan in the den. Something about timing, inheritance, and promises. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard enough to know this wasn't just about love. There were motives hidden under silk sheets and champagne smiles. That evening, while searching for a box of wrapping paper in Grandma's study, I found something curious, a jewelry box I hadn't seen in years. It used to be Grandma's, filled with antique brooches and pearls. I opened it and froze. Inside was a necklace. An heirloom sapphire pendant that had vanished years ago, presumed stolen. And Lila had been wearing it 2 nights ago. I held the necklace in my hand, the deep blue stone glinting under the desk lamp. It was always meant to go to me, passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, but it had disappeared right after Lila's college graduation. At the time, Grandma insisted it had simply been misplaced. Now I understood. I returned to the living room, where Grandma was seated, knitting, I placed the necklace silently on the side table. She didn't look up. She wore it the night he told me, I said. She stole it. Still knitting, Grandma murmured. I know. You knew? She finally looked up. Her eyes were steely. I've always known more than I let on. Then why didn't you say anything? Her lips curved into a small, tight smile. Because timing is everything. And Christmas is coming. That night, as snow began falling again outside, Lila cornered me in the hallway. You think this is over? She hissed. You think she's gonna hand you everything, and I'll just disappear? I think, I said evenly, you're about to find out what happens when you run out of people to manipulate. She tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. You're not the only one who knows how to play the long game, she said, her voice low and threatening. That was her mistake. Because she had no idea what game Grandma was playing. And neither did I, yet. If I had been paying closer attention that night, I might have realized the moment Grandma switched gears from observer to tactician. It was the evening of December 23rd. The tree was lit, the fire was crackling, and the smell of roasted garlic and pine needles filled the house. To anyone walking in, it would have looked like a Christmas card come to life. But under the glitter and garlands, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a carving knife. Lila was playing the gracious guest, floating around in cream-colored wool and forced smiles, as if the family couldn't sense the crackle in the air when she entered a room. Ryan, the man I used to trust with my future, was pretending to help Grandma in the kitchen, but I saw his hands tremble as he handled the carving knife. I hoped he cut himself. I stayed mostly quiet, observing, processing. Every interaction between them now seemed suspicious. Every shared glance felt loaded. But it was Grandma who intrigued me the most. She was calm, too calm. After the bombshell Ryan dropped on me just days earlier, leaving me for my sister, most people would have expected Grandma to launch into a full matriarchal meltdown. But she didn't. Instead, that night, she retreated into her favorite ritual. A single glass of Amontillado sherry poured precisely at 9 p.m., always in a crystal tumbler older than I was. She didn't offer anyone else a drink. She just sat in her chair by the window, the one with the embroidered throw and a clear view of the snow-covered garden. I walked in quietly, hoping to steal a moment alone with her. As I entered, I caught her mid-sip. Want company? I asked gently. She didn't look at me right away. Depends. Are you planning on making a confession or asking for one? I blinked. Neither. She nodded slowly, eyes still on the snow. Then sit down. I sank into the armchair across from her. The silence stretched. I know you saw the necklace, she said at last. I nodded. She stole it, I replied. And you let her. She swirled the sherry in her glass. Because sometimes it's better to let a thief think they've gotten away with it. That's when they get sloppy. You've known about Leela and Ryan for a while, haven't you? A pause. Yes. My breath caught. Why didn't you tell me? She finally turned to me. Her eyes, still sharp despite her 82 years, were brimming with something unreadable. Anger? Guilt? Strategy? Because you weren't ready to know, she said simply. And I needed to be sure. Sure of what? She took another slow sip. That you had the spine to survive it. I stared at her, stunned. You were testing me. No. I was watching. There's a difference. I didn't know what to say to that. So I watched her instead. The firelight flickered across her face, casting shadows that deepened the lines of age and wisdom carved into her skin. She looked more like a queen than a grandmother, an aging monarch surveying a battlefield she knew better than anyone. They think I'm old and irrelevant, she continued. But what they don't realize is that I've outlived 2 husbands, 1 corporate coup, and a scandal that nearly took down this family in 1974. I know how to bide my time. She leaned forward now, her voice dropping to a whisper. And now I know how far your sister and your husband are willing to go. A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" She stood, slowly, gracefully, and walked to the side table where the landline phone still sat, mostly unused in a world of smartphones. She picked it up and dialed a number from memory. I watched in silence as she spoke, her back to me. "Yes, it's me," she said calmly. "We'll proceed as discussed. Have the documents ready by tomorrow morning." Click. She turned back toward me. "Merry Christmas, darling," she said, a half smile tugging at her lips. "It's going to be a very different holiday this year." Before I could ask what she meant, she left the room. I sat there, stunned. Something was happening, something big, something that had been in motion long before Ryan opened his mouth. And Grandma? She wasn't just sipping sherry, she was playing chess. The next morning, I woke to find her humming in the kitchen, wearing her best cashmere sweater and pearls. She was baking her famous cranberry scones, the smell drawing everyone from their rooms. Even Ryan and Lila looked confused, uneasy, as if they sensed a disturbance in the force. But the real sign that something had shifted? She handed me a handwritten list of guests arriving later that evening. The last name on the list? Mr. Lowell Chambers. Chambers and Moss Law Firm. Her lawyer. In a snowstorm. 3 days before Christmas. And suddenly, I realized. The quiet matriarch wasn't letting this family fall apart. She was pulling it apart. On purpose. By Christmas Eve, the snow had turned hostile. What began as a soft, scenic flurry had thickened into a relentless storm, coating the roads in ice and cutting off any easy escape. The wind howled through the branches like a warning, and even the lights flickered once or twice, as if the house itself were bracing for what was coming. Grandma, meanwhile, was absolutely unbothered. She spent the day trimming the tree, again, with surgical precision, rejecting any ornament that didn't meet her invisible aesthetic code. Lila tried to hover nearby, pretending everything was fine, while Ryan stuck close to the fireplace, nursing a drink and avoiding eye contact with anyone. Tension crackled like static electricity. Everyone was pretending to play happy family, but under the surface we were one match away from explosion. Then, at precisely 4:42 p.m., there was a knock at the front door. Everyone froze. "Who the hell would be driving in this storm?" Ryan muttered, getting up reluctantly. I beat him to the door. Through the frosted glass I saw a tall silhouette in a black wool coat and leather gloves, dusted with snow. When I opened it, a blast of freezing air followed him in, along with the smell of cigar smoke and polished leather. "Miss Carmichael," the man said with a nod. "Mr. Lowell Chambers. Here on behalf of your grandmother." I stepped aside, stunned. Behind me, Lila appeared with a forced smile. "A lawyer? Today?" Chambers looked at her with clinical disinterest. "Your grandmother was quite specific about the timing. I don't usually make house calls in a blizzard, but she made it worth my while." Behind us, Grandma had appeared in the hallway, dressed like she was about to chair a corporate meeting instead of host a holiday dinner. Cashmere dress, pearls, and her signature blood-red lipstick. "Right on time," she said, eyeing the lawyer with satisfaction. "Come in, Lowell. Let's not keep the family waiting." 10 minutes later, we were all gathered in the formal living room, a room we rarely used unless someone died or got married, and both felt vaguely possible. Grandma sat at the head of the room in her favorite wingback chair. Mr. Chambers took the floor, setting down a black briefcase beside him and pulling out a stack of sealed envelopes. "I have in my possession an updated legal will and testament for Eleanor Jean Carmichael," he began, "signed, witnessed, and filed within the last 24 hours. Lila stiffened. Ryan blinked. I held my breath. Wait, Lila said, waving a manicured hand. "Why now? Why so dramatic?" Grandma didn't even blink. "Because, darling, drama is wasted on the dead. I prefer to enjoy the show while I'm still breathing." Lowell opened the first envelope, revealing a thick document. "Mrs. Carmichael has requested that this be read aloud in its entirety, effective immediately." I felt the room shift. Ryan leaned forward. Lila crossed her arms. As Mr. Chambers began to read, I couldn't help but glance at Grandma. She looked amused. Pleased, even. The will was long and filled with legal jargon, landholdings, business shares, investment portfolios, all of it carefully detailed. But the real twist came 20 minutes in. To my granddaughter, Mr. Chambers read, who has endured betrayal with dignity and has never once used cruelty to get her way, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all controlling shares of Carmichael Enterprises, the Lake Serenity property, and full inheritance rights. The air was vacuumed out of the room. Lila choked on her own breath. Excuse me? Ryan sat bolt upright. That's everything. Mr. Chambers didn't flinch. Yes, everything. I couldn't move. My pulse thundered in my ears. Lila stood. This is insane! She's manipulating you. She's always been the victim, always turning everything around. She doesn't even care about the company. Grandma raised a hand. Sit down, Lila. Lila ignored her. She's just jealous. I found love, maybe not in the best way, but I'm happy. Why does that mean I get punished? Grandma's voice cut the air like a scalpel, because betrayal should never be rewarded. Silence. Then she stood, and that's when the real twist landed. I've known about your affair for over a year, she said, stepping forward. Do you know how? Because your sister didn't lie to me. But you did. Over and over. Her eyes narrowed. And so did you, Ryan. You two thought you were being clever. Secret meetups, fake business trips, whispering behind doors. You weren't clever. You were careless. You assumed I was too old to notice. She pulled something from her cardigan pocket. Photographs. Crisp color prints. Lila's face went pale. These were taken by someone I hired. A professional. Not only did he confirm your affair, he also confirmed the rest. I frowned. The rest? Grandma turned to me. Darling, your sister and your husband didn't just betray you. They planned to take everything. Carmichael Enterprises. The lake house. Even the antique jewelry line your great-grandmother built. She looked at them both with disgust. They were waiting for me to die. Ryan tried to speak. That's not... Shut up, she snapped. You'll be lucky if I don't charge you with fraud. I have the documents, I have the emails. Then she turned back to me and said the words that changed everything. This family needs a future. And it sure as hell won't come from either of them. It'll come from you. I wasn't sure if I felt victorious or terrified. All I knew was that in that moment, while the snow raged and the fire cracked behind us, I became someone else entirely. Not the betrayed wife, not the invisible sister, not the victim, but the heir. And the game had just begun. They say people remember where they were when history is made. For our family, that moment was Christmas Day at precisely 2:06 p.m., right after the roast was served and just before Lila tried to flip the dining table. Let me back up. The storm hadn't let up, and neither had the tension. The house felt like it was holding its breath. We all moved through the morning pretending to be festive. Ryan poured mimosas with a fake smile. Lila opened gifts in a silk robe like we were in a Hallmark movie. But there was something brittle behind her eyes like a porcelain doll mid-crack. Me? I kept quiet and waited. Because Grandma had said, Christmas Day, and Grandma never misses a deadline. She waited until dessert, her famous bourbon pecan pie, was being served before she struck. She stood at the head of the table, tapped her spoon against her wine glass, and said with the air of a monarch, Well, now that we've all eaten, let's address the aftertaste. Everyone froze. Ryan glanced at me, nervous. Lila tilted her head in that condescending way of hers. What do you mean, Grandma? Grandma gestured, and Mr. Chambers, the lawyer who'd stayed overnight due to the storm, entered the dining room holding a sleek, black folio. His presence alone made Lila stiffen. Ryan muttered something under his breath. Grandma looked at them both. I told you yesterday the will had been changed. But I didn't tell you everything. Mr. Chambers began removing documents. This, he said, placing a thick packet on the table, is the updated, notarized, last will and testament of Eleanor Jean Carmichael, signed and witnessed in accordance with state law. Everyone held their breath. Effective immediately, Grandma said, folding her hands over her pearls. All assets under my name, including Carmichael Enterprises, the Lake Serenity Estate, the Manhattan property, and my remaining investments, are now legally in the possession of my granddaughter. She turned to me, and her smile wasn't warm. It was victorious. Lila gasped so hard I thought she'd choke on her pie. You're giving everything to her? She cried. You can't be serious? Ryan shot up from his chair. What the hell, Eleanor? I gave 10 years to this family. Grandma turned to him like he was a stain on her linen. You gave 10 years to scheming behind my back, to whispering lies, to planting doubt, Mr. Chambers added quietly. We have documentation, emails, texts, and transfers to an offshore account in the Caymans in Mr. Hollis's name. The account was opened with your help, Miss Lila. The room exploded. Lila screamed, You went through my finances? Grandma didn't flinch. No, darling, I went through your life. I've watched for years as you used charm like a scalpel, slicing your way through trust, loyalty, and blood. Ryan tried to play innocent. We didn't plan to steal anything. We were going to tell the truth. You were going to wait until I was dead, Grandma cut in, but I got bored of waiting. She raised her wine glass. To Karma. But she wasn't done. I've also included stipulations. Lila, you are to be removed from the board of Carmichael Enterprises, effective immediately. Ryan, your employment is terminated, and you are to vacate the company penthouse within 72 hours. Lila's eyes went wild. You're making a mistake. She doesn't know how to run a business. She's soft. She's always been soft. I stood. No, Lila, I've been quiet. Not soft. There's a difference, Grandma chuckled darkly. You always mistook her silence for weakness. But she was just watching, just like I did, and now she'll do what I no longer can. Lila lunged. For what? I'm still not sure. My face? Grandma's pearls? Mr. Chambers calmly stepped in front of her like he'd done this before. You can't do this, Ryan barked, face red. I'll sue. I'll take this public. You'll be laughed out of court, Mr. Chambers said smoothly, especially once the private investigator testifies. Grandma's gaze turned cold. Go ahead, Ryan. Try me. Then she turned to me and placed her wrinkled hand over mine. You've earned this. Not because you're perfect, but because you never played dirty, even when they did. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, really seen. Not as a placeholder daughter or the background sister, but as the future. The family sat in stunned silence. Lila's mascara was smeared. Ryan was visibly shaking. And then Grandma said, as she sat back down and lifted her fork, Now, someone pass the damn pie. We're not animals. It's strange, the kind of silence that follows a bombshell, not peaceful silence. Charged, electric, waiting for the aftershock silence. That's what filled the room after Grandma disinherited my sister and ex-husband, but I could feel it in the air. We weren't done, not even close. After dinner, we moved like ghosts through the house. Lila stormed upstairs, wailing into her phone about legal action and emotional sabotage. Ryan paced near the window, trying to get a signal, muttering about reputations and non-disclosure agreements. And Grandma? She sat in her reading chair like a monarch surveying a kingdom recently scorched by fire. Then she turned to me. There's more you need to know, she said. Not just about them. About all of us. She gestured to the lawyer. who produced yet another folder from his bottomless briefcase. I braced myself. Surely nothing could top what had already been said. I was wrong. Grandma waited until I sat across from her before she spoke. I've known about the affair for over a year, she began. Ryan and Lila weren't as clever as they thought. I suspected before I confirmed it. Subtle things. A shared look. A missing tie. A charge on your joint card for a boutique necklace your sister just happened to wear 2 days later. I winced. But it wasn't until I hired a private investigator that I saw the full picture. He didn't just uncover their betrayal, darling. He found something else. She paused. Something I've hidden for decades. The lawyer opened the folder and handed me a photograph. Black and white, faded at the edges. A man in a military jacket. Broad-shouldered, square-jawed, unmistakably familiar. That's your grandfather, I said, instinctively. Grandma nodded. No, that's not your grandfather. That's Richard Ellison, your father's best friend. And the man your mother had an affair with before your father died? My stomach dropped. What? I always suspected, she said, her voice heavy now, like each word cost her. But I never confronted her. She was pregnant when your father died in that boating accident. I raised both you girls like blood. But only one of you truly was. I blinked. Are you saying Lila is Richard's daughter, not your father's? I couldn't breathe. She's not your full sister, and your father didn't die by accident, sweetheart. That was the first betrayal. I shot to my feet. What are you saying? That someone killed him? Grandma didn't answer right away. She looked past me, out the window, where the snow fell in thick, eerie sheets. They were on the boat together, your father and Richard. Supposedly a weekend fishing trip. Only Richard came back. He told the authorities, your father slipped, hit his head, and drowned. They never found the body. I felt like the ground was tilting under me. And you believed him? I wanted to, she said quietly. But I never truly did. Richard married another woman within 6 months, and your mother, she fell apart, started drinking. She died of cirrhosis 5 years later. The room blurred. You think Richard killed Dad? Grandma looked me in the eyes. I think your father discovered the affair, and I think that trip was never meant to bring him back. A cold sweat ran down my spine. My father's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was possibly a murder covered up as misfortune. A crime buried under decades of silence. And my sister, the one who'd stolen my husband, was the illegitimate daughter of the man who may have killed my father. I sat back down, heart hammering. Why are you telling me this now? Grandma reached for my hand. Because the past has teeth, darling, and you can't build a future without knowing what's buried under the foundation. I thought of the times Lila had accused me of always being Daddy's favorite. Now I understood why I was the one carrying his blood. She had always been the reminder of the man who may have stolen his life. Does she know? I asked. She suspects, Grandma said, but I never confirmed it. I wanted to protect you both from the ugliness. But she made her choice. She chose deception, like her father before her. I looked down at the photograph in my lap. A stranger's eyes stared back at me from a face that shouldn't have existed in my family's photo albums. So what now? I whispered. Grandma's voice hardened. Now you prepare. Because this isn't just a will dispute anymore, it's a war for legacy. And if I know Richard Ellison, and I do, he won't let go easily, not if he thinks there's still something left to steal. And suddenly, everything I thought I understood about my family was ash. The lies weren't just recent, they were generational. The betrayal in my home hadn't started with Lila and Ryan. It started the day my father never came back from that boat. And the storm was still far from over. By the next morning, I didn't recognize my own reflection, or the family it belonged to. Sleep had eluded me. My mind spun with images. My father, lost to the lake. Richard Ellison, smirking in the old photo like he'd won something. Lila, with her crocodile tears and diamond pendant that wasn't from Santa, but from my husband. No, not my husband. Not anymore. And then there was Grandma, sitting in the living room again like nothing had happened. Dressed in navy silk and pearls, flipping through the Wall Street Journal as if she hadn't cracked the family open like an egg the night before. I walked in holding the photo of Richard. Why now? She didn't even look up, because pretending costs more than telling the truth. Is that what you've been doing all these years? I asked. Pretending? Grandma folded the paper, finally meeting my eyes. Protecting. There's a difference. Your father was loyal to the end. But Lila? She's built from a different cloth. One I didn't sew. I sat, trying to process what still felt unreal. I always thought I was the afterthought. The backup. The quiet one who didn't shine bright enough. Grandma's face softened. That's exactly what made you dangerous. You didn't need attention, you just watched. And watching is how we survive in this family. She reached for a folder and handed it to me. Inside were birth certificates, sealed paternity test results, and one envelope marked in her handwriting. Only open if she challenges the will. Inside was a letter addressed to Lila, written years ago. She came to me when she was 17, Grandma said, sipping her tea, begging to know if the rumors were true, if she wasn't your father's child. I told her I couldn't be sure, but that if she wanted to dig, she'd have to be ready for the dirt. And? She dug, quietly, had a DNA test done without you knowing. She's known for years, knew what she was, and instead of making peace with it, she resented you even more. I looked at the letter. Lila's angry handwriting scrawled across the envelope's back. You chose her. You always chose her. The ache in my chest wasn't sadness anymore. It was grief. For the childhood I thought we'd shared, for the sister I thought I had. She never forgave your father, Grandma said. She blamed him for dying. For not being there. But really, she blamed you for having what she couldn't. A name, a legacy, legitimacy. I laughed bitterly. And now she has nothing. Grandma raised an eyebrow. You think so? Something in her tone made my blood run cold. She doesn't have the will. She doesn't have Ryan. But she's still dangerous. You need to understand that. Right on cue, the front door slammed. Lila stood there, windswept, mascara smeared into war paint. You manipulative old witch. Grandma didn't flinch. Merry Christmas to you too, dear. Lila stormed into the room, shoving papers in my face. You think this will stand? You think you get everything while I get nothing? I'm his daughter, whether he was on the birth certificate or not. No, I said, standing. You're Richard Ellison's daughter, and that is exactly why you're not in it. Her eyes narrowed. You think people will believe you? That I seduced your husband and plotted to take the business? You sound unhinged. I pulled out the printed emails and bank records from the lawyer's folder and laid them on the coffee table like playing cards. Try me, she sneered. This isn't over. Funny, Grandma said, standing slowly. That's exactly what your mother said the day she found out she was pregnant with you. Lila froze. What? She didn't want you, Grandma said quietly. She begged me to take you when you were born. She said you were the curse that ruined her marriage, that ended her life. That's a lie. Lila's voice cracked. No, Grandma said. That's the legacy you inherited. But what you did with it, that's all on you. Tears filled Lila's eyes, but it wasn't regret, it was rage. She backed away slowly, like a wounded animal. You think this ends with a will and a few signatures? She spat. You don't even know what's coming. With that, she turned and left. Her boots crunched through the snow, the door slamming behind her like a final punctuation mark. I stood there in silence. And then Grandma said the most chilling thing of all. She's not crying because she lost. She's crying because she knows something we don't. What do you mean? Grandma didn't answer right away. But I saw it in her eyes. The game wasn't over. It had just changed boards. There's a difference between owning something and commanding it. I learned that the day after Christmas, when Grandma called an emergency shareholders meeting for the family company. The business, Ellison Hart Industries, wasn't just some dusty old legacy. It was an empire, real estate, hospitality, and old money influence wrapped in generational contracts. It had been started by my great-grandfather and ruled like a kingdom ever since. Until now. Grandma sat at the head of the table, regal as ever, flanked by her lawyer on one side and me on the other. The boardroom windows overlooked the snowy countryside. The storm outside had calmed, but inside? We were just getting started. My ex-husband Ryan walked in late, bold as brass in a custom coat he probably bought with my money. Lila wasn't with him this time. Maybe she knew better. Ryan greeted the room like nothing had happened. "Sorry for the delay. Roads were a mess. Let's get this over with." The lawyer stood. "This emergency meeting has been called to address changes in the company's ownership and leadership structure." Ryan raised a brow. "Changes? Without board consensus?" Grandma's voice was like a knife through butter. "Oh, we're past consensus, darling." The lawyer continued. "Per the updated last will and testament of Margaret Hart Ellison, dated December 25th, controlling shares of Ellison Hart Industries have been transferred from Margaret Hart Ellison to," he nodded toward me, "her granddaughter, sole heir, and effective majority shareholder." Silence. Ryan blinked. "You're joking." Grandma tilted her glass of water. "Do I look like I'm joking?" I stood, calm and collected, even though my heart pounded like a war drum. "Effective immediately, I'll be assuming the role of interim chairwoman." Ryan laughed, a desperate, cracking sound. "You've never run a company in your life." "No," I said, "but I studied every quarterly report while you were too busy taking business trips with my sister. You thought I wasn't paying attention. But I learned from the best. And unfortunately for you, I have all the documentation showing your attempt to buy out shares behind Grandma's back." His jaw tightened. "Oh yes," I continued. "You planned to use Lila as a proxy, marry her, inherit shares through marriage, vote me out, and eventually flip the company for profit. It was neat, clean, clinical." Ryan's face darkened. "You can't prove." The lawyer dropped a thick file on the table. "Actually, we can. Wire transfers, emails, a recording of your phone call with a prospective buyer discussing liquidation." I leaned forward. "Did you really think you'd win a corporate chess match against two women who raised this empire?" Ryan's bravado slipped. "This is illegal," Grandma smirked. "No, dear. It's uncomfortable. There's a difference." He turned to the other board members, cousins, in-laws, executives who once called me the quiet one. "You're gonna let this happen?" One by one, they looked away. That's when I knew. I had them. Not just the votes, the respect. I took a breath and delivered the final blow. "Ryan Grayson, effective immediately, you're terminated from your executive role. You will no longer represent this company in any capacity." He stood. "You can't fire me." Grandma leaned back. "Oh, but she just did." Ryan's fury simmered. "I'll sue." "Please do," the lawyer said, barely glancing up. "We've already drafted the response. But you should be aware. Should you proceed, we'll be releasing your affair documentation to the press. And perhaps even the SEC, given the nature of your unauthorized financial movements." Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. Checkmate. He stormed out, the echo of his designer boots sounding more like defeat than defiance. Once he was gone, the boardroom relaxed. But not Grandma. She turned to me. "You did well." I met her gaze. "I'm not celebrating yet." "Good," she said, "because there's one more thing." She slid a slim USB drive across the table. "What's this?" "Surveillance, a hidden camera I had installed in my study 6 months ago, just in case." I hesitated, then plugged it into the conference room monitor. The footage played. Lila, sitting in Grandma's chair, talking to someone off camera. "I don't care what it costs," she hissed. We'll find a way. She doesn't deserve it, none of it. A pause. Then the voice replied, male. Smooth. Familiar. I told you, once the baby's born, things get easier. Inheritance law gets fuzzy when heirs are involved. Lila's reply chilled me. You think she'll believe it's yours? The man laughed. And that's when I froze. It wasn't Ryan's voice. It was Richard Ellison's. The man who may have killed my father. The man who sired my sister. The man who was back in play. I looked to Grandma. She invited him in? Grandma didn't blink. I told you, this is a war. And your sister? She just rearmed. I should have known it wasn't over. After the business coup, after Ryan's exit, and the video footage of Richard Ellison colluding with Lila, I believed the worst was behind me. But that was before the Whisper campaign started. Before old friends stopped returning my calls. Before I overheard my name in the mouths of board members like it was a scandal they couldn't wait to escape from. And it was before Lila made the announcement. She arrived uninvited, strutting into Grandma's house with her head high and her hand resting protectively on her barely there belly. I'm pregnant, she declared in the foyer, loud enough for the whole house to hear. And it's Ryan's. She didn't cry, she didn't ask for forgiveness. She performed it, each syllable sharp and deliberate, crafted to wound. Ryan was gone, sure, but a child? That could complicate inheritance, challenge the will, ruin everything, my heart hammered. Is that a threat or a desperate power grab? Maybe both, she said sweetly, but the media will love it. The scorned ex-wife, the billionaire baby scandal. Oh, and Grandma's shameful secrets? Front page gold. I almost lunged at her, but Grandma stepped between us, surprisingly calm. You're glowing, she said, eyeing Lila with the precision of a scientist examining a disease. Funny how that happens when there's blood in the water. Lila blinked. Excuse me? Grandma didn't answer. She turned and left the room, just like that. But I knew her well enough by now. Something was coming. 2 days later, I found the lab results in a sealed envelope beside my morning coffee, marked only with my name. Inside, a single page. DNA analysis. Fetal and paternal comparison. My hands shook. It wasn't Ryan's. But the father was a match. To Richard Ellison. I couldn't breathe. Not for seconds that felt like years. The man who had seduced my mother, the man Grandma suspected, had something to do with my father's mysterious death. The man who was also Lila's biological father. Meaning, I dropped the paper like it burned. She was pregnant by her own father. Or half-father. Depending on which sin you wanted to emphasize. I ran to Grandma's study, the envelope in hand, but she already knew. Of course she did. She had the look of someone who'd read the last chapter before anyone else even opened the book. She seduced him, she said, not looking up. Or maybe he seduced her. But does it matter? My voice broke. They're related. Yes, Grandma said coldly. And monsters tend to find each other. She turned to me, sharp as ever. This child, if it's born, complicates everything. If Lila spins the narrative, she could try to claim a stake in the estate as the mother of a blood heir. And Richard, well, let's just say he's always had his eye on the throne. I sat down hard. What do we do? Grandma smiled, and it terrified me. We do what Ellison women have always done when surrounded by wolves. We burn the forest down before they can corner us. The plan unfolded like a symphony of vengeance. First, Grandma sent the DNA results to her most trusted journalist, anonymous of course, with a neat little note. The Ellison name deserves the truth. Next, we called in a quiet favor at the Department of Family Law. An old contact owed Grandma a debt, and soon a formal investigation was opened into Lila's pregnancy and its implications for guardianship. Then came the twist no one expected, even me. Grandma hosted a press event. Not for damage control, but a celebration. She announced her formal retirement from public leadership and introduced me as the new CEO of Ellison Hart Industries. She praised my strength, my unflinching loyalty to truth, and then dropped a live grenade. As a family, we've faced deception, betrayal, even attempts to weaponize motherhood for power. But the Ellison legacy does not reward secrecy, it rewards integrity. Reporters pounced. Questions flew. But Grandma refused to elaborate. She didn't have to. The next morning, headlines exploded. Ellison heiress's sister expecting baby with convicted embezzler and alleged murder suspect. Family responds with stunning corporate power shift. Ellison matriarch declares war on scandal, integrity over inheritance. Lila tried to spin the story. Claimed she'd been groomed, that Richard wasn't really her father, that Grandma doctored the test. But the damage was done. The public turned, the board turned, and the last ally she had, Richard Ellison, was arrested on an unrelated tax fraud case that Grandma had been quietly feeding the authorities for months. When I finally confronted Lila, she was packing a bag in the dark guest house behind the estate. "You destroyed me," she whispered, eyes hollow. "No," I said. "You were always broken. You just thought hurting me would fix you." She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she just walked out, alone. And I let her go. Because the legacy didn't need her anymore. It had me. The snow had started again, falling soft and slow like ash after a battlefield blaze. The estate was quieter than it had been in weeks. The media frenzy had died down. Richard was awaiting trial in federal custody, and Lila, my sister, my betrayer, had vanished from the public eye. Her departure left a silence in the house that felt more like a space finally cleared for something true. I sat in Grandma's solarium, sipping the same dry sherry she favored, watching the snowfall blur the world outside. I didn't hear her enter, but I felt her presence behind me, sharp, poised, sovereign. "You've held your ground," she said, "even when it cost you." I turned. "I didn't do it for legacy." "I know." She crossed the room, her emerald brooch glinting under the chandelier. "That's why you deserve it." She sat across from me, not as Margaret Hart Ellison, the iron-fisted matriarch who built an empire, but as my grandmother, the woman who held a secret too long, who watched 2 generations burn themselves on the same flame. "You remind me of my mother," she said. "She was kind, but brutal when it mattered. She used to say, 'The heart is a house with many rooms, but the throne is always in the center.'" I gave a dry laugh. "So this was all a test?" "In part." She didn't flinch. "I needed to know who could carry the Ellison name forward. Not just the wealth. The burden. The darkness. The knives behind smiles." She leaned forward, her eyes suddenly misting. "And I'm sorry for letting it all rot so long before giving it to you." I almost cried, but Ellison women didn't do that in daylight. Instead, I asked, "Why now?" She reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. Not sealed, not stamped. Just my name in her elegant, angular script. "Because it's time," she said. "Inside are the final transfer papers. Control of the Ellison Trust, the board vote override, the final 3% share I kept. After today, you won't need my approval to move forward. You'll be the head of the family, the queen." My breath caught. "What about you?" She looked out the window, her expression unreadable. "I've done my time. I spent 82 years making peace with ghosts and nurturing a garden of thorns. But you? You could grow something else, if you choose to." And then came the real twist. "I also added one final clause to the trust," she said, voice calm as a scalpel. "If Lila ever tries to reclaim her stake, or file a claim on behalf of the child, she will be required to submit to a psychiatric evaluation and paternity reconfirmation every 5 years until the child turns 18. If she refuses, she gets nothing. And neither will her child." I stared. "That's harsh, even for you." She planned to use that baby as a weapon. The moment she didn't get what she wanted to set it off. This clause is the safety switch. I shook my head, stunned. You never stop calculating. She gave me the tiniest smile. Neither will you. Then she stood, slower than she used to, and reached into her pocket one more time. Out came a velvet box. I opened it. Inside was a signet ring. Old gold, heavy with the Ellison crest. My mother gave it to me when I took over, Grandma said. Now, I give it to you. And let me be clear. You didn't inherit this family. You survived it. You earned every acre of this cursed kingdom. I slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Later that night, the family gathered one last time before the new year. The dining room sparkled with crystal and candlelight, but the atmosphere was different now. Still formal, but no longer a lie. Grandma made a quiet toast. To our future, and to those who finally deserve it. No one dared protest. I stood when the dessert came, lifted my own glass, and spoke the words that sealed it all. I am no longer the girl in the shadows. I'm not the wife left behind or the sister betrayed. I am Ellison by blood, by fire, and by choice. And this family, whatever's left of it, answers to me now. Silence followed. And then applause. Slow, uncertain at first, then steady, even from the few who had doubted me just days before, because power doesn't come from anger or money or revenge. It comes from standing in the wreckage and not blinking. When the snow settled that night, I stood alone on the balcony with the ring on my finger, the contract in my safe, and the Ellison Empire under my name. I didn't win the crown. I took it. And this Christmas, karma came wrapped in red and gold paper, with my initials embossed in iron. Long live the Queen.